Tonight I will tell you a story that your grandmothers told me, and their grandmothers told them. A story about the gods, about pride, and about how sometimes we must lose everything to find what truly matters. This is the story of OMALICHA from the ancient village of umuakpa. Ah, you know that name? Good. It means beautiful, and she carried that beauty like a weapon, that girl. But the gods have their own plans for the proud. Now settle down and let this old woman speak. That evening long ago, the village square was alive with celebration. Drums vibrated through the red earth, making your chest feel like it was part of the rhythm itself. Palm wine flowed freely from calabashes into eager mouths. People danced under the full moon, their bodies moving like shadows possessed by ancestral joy. Young OMALICHA stood in the center, her braided hair threaded with cowries that clicked when she moved her head. Every eye was on her, you see. Young men stared with hunger in their eyes. Women whispered with envy in their hearts. Her father, Chief Odoziabodo, watched from his carved stool with pride swelling his chest like a rooster at dawn. Then someone, an elder like myself, mentioned marriage. Said love would find her soon. And what did that foolish girl do? She laughed. Loud and careless, with no respect for the spirits listening. True love, she mocked. Love is just a story old people tell to make poverty sound romantic. Ah, the moment those words left her mouth, everything changed. The wind stopped. Every single leaf froze like time itself had paused. The drums stuttered and died. Even the crickets went silent. Then, my children, a blinding white light flashed across the square. The gods had heard her mockery. OMALICHA collapsed right there in the dust, screaming as her vision disappeared. One moment she could see the shocked faces around her. The next, only darkness. Complete, total, suffocating darkness like being buried alive. Panic erupted in that square like a disturbed anthill. Hands grabbed at her from all directions. Voices shouted her name. Chief Odoziabodo roared like a wounded lion, "What is happening? Someone help my daughter." The village priest pushed through the crowd, his ceremonial staff striking the ground. When he spoke, his voice cut through the chaos like a machete through grass. The deity has struck her for dishonoring love. You should have seen the chief's face, children. Like a man watching his compound burn. Fix this, he commanded. Do something. I am the chief here. But what can a chief do when the gods themselves have acted? OMALICHA clawed at her beautiful face, trying to rub away the darkness. She thought perhaps ash had blown into her eyes, or some spell had been cast that she could wipe clean. But no. The darkness wasn't on her eyes, it was in them. Behind them. Everywhere. Please, she begged, her voice breaking like old pottery. Please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I take back my words. The priest knelt beside her, examining her eyes in the firelight. We all held our breath, waiting for his judgment. When he spoke again, his voice was low, meant only for the chief. But you know how it is in a village when everyone has fallen silent. Every ear becomes as sharp as a bat's. This punishment, the priest whispered, is only the beginning. Those words froze the blood of everyone who heard them. Beginning? What more could the gods take from this girl? Chief Odoziabodo lifted his daughter in his strong arms, something he hadn't done since she was small enough to ride on his shoulders. As he carried her away from that square, the whispers started. Like wind through dry grass, they spread. OMALICHA, the beautiful one, struck down by the gods themselves for her pride. Now, children, imagine being that girl. Locked in darkness in your own hut while the whole village talks about you. That's where OMALICHA found herself, weeping until she had no tears left. She felt her father's disappointment like a knife twisting in her chest. You see, Chief Odoziabodo said nothing as he laid her on her sleeping mat. Not one word of comfort. Not one touch of reassurance. His silence hurt worse than if he had beaten her. She touched her face with trembling fingers, that face that had been her pride, her power, her very identity. Now it felt like a curse. Her eyes were open but saw nothing. Just endless black, like being trapped in a sealed pot. "Father," she whispered into the darkness. "I'm sorry. Please, Father, speak to me." He cleared his throat once. Then twice. Heavy footsteps walked away. The sound of those footsteps leaving her alone in darkness would echo in her mind forever. OMALICHA begged the gods for mercy through the long night. She promised to be humble, to be kind, to never mock love again. She swore on her ancestors' graves that she had learned her lesson. But the darkness remained, thick and unchanging as the night itself. Hours passed. Maybe days. She couldn't tell anymore without the sun to mark time. Then she heard urgent footsteps outside. Many of them. The rustle of ceremonial robes. The tap of walking sticks on hard earth. Chief Odosiabodo was summoning all the village elders for an emergency council. Her fate, children, was being decided by old men in a room she couldn't even see. Through the thin walls of her hut, she pressed her ear against the mud, straining to hear every word. Whatever they decided would determine the rest of her life. And she, who had once commanded attention with just a glance, now couldn't even witness her own judgment. The chief's voice was rough with desperation. "Children. I was there that night, young as you are now, hiding in the shadows and listening. Tell me how to fix this," he demanded. "I will sacrifice anything. Goats, chickens, even my finest bull. Just tell me what the gods want." The priest's response was slow and careful, like a man walking through thorns. "The gods want humility from this household, chief. Your pride in OMALICHA's beauty offended them as much as her words did." Oh, you should have heard the chief's sharp breath. His pride was everything to him, you understand. He had built his reputation on having the most beautiful daughter in 3 villages. He had boasted about it at every gathering. He had expected to marry her to a king, to a wealthy trader, to someone who would elevate his own status even higher. "What must I do?" he finally asked, and even I could hear the crack in his mighty voice. "The spirits have sent me a vision," the priest said. "They have chosen a path for OMALICHA. A path of humility and true understanding." "Speak plainly, old man," Chief Odosiabodo demanded, his patience wearing thin. The priest paused. In that pause, the very air seemed to thicken with anticipation. We all leaned closer, we young ones hiding in the shadows, straining to hear. "Marriage," the priest said at last. "To someone humble. Someone who knows suffering. Someone who understands what it means to have nothing. Only then will the gods consider showing mercy to your daughter." The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard an ant walking. Then the chief spoke, his voice strangled like something was choking him. "Who? Who have they chosen for her?" "Uzodinma." I remember gasping when I heard that name. The quiet orphan boy. The servant who swept the chief's compound. The one who slept on a raffia mat in the servants' quarters. That Uzodinma. Chief Odosiabodo's fist hit the wooden table with such force that the sound cracked through the night like lightning. "Never," he roared. "I will not give my daughter to a nobody. A servant. An orphan with no family, no name, no future." But the gods, children, the gods had already decided. And who can argue with the gods? Now let me tell you about Uzodinma, because his story matters too. Not every tale of destiny begins in a palace, you see. Sometimes it begins on a raffia mat in a tiny room behind someone else's compound. Uzodinma slept there, in that small space barely big enough for a grown man to lie down. He rose every morning before even the roosters woke, before the first light touched the sky. Moving quietly through the compound, he would start his work while others still dreamed. He treated the chief's animals with such gentleness, you understand. Speaking softly to the goats, calming the nervous chickens, touching each creature like it mattered. People said he hummed ancient melodies, songs that no living person had taught him. Songs that made the animals peaceful and brought the chickens home without fuss. Now, a few days before that festival where OMALICHA spoke her foolish words, something strange happened. A mysterious old woman appeared at the edge of the forest, right at the back of Chief Odosiabodo's compound. She stood there in the morning mist, staring at Uzodinma as he worked. Just staring. Not moving. Not speaking. Just watching him with eyes that seemed to see through time itself. One of the servants mentioned it to the chief. "Master, there's a strange woman at the forest edge. She's been watching the orphan boy for an hour now." "Just a madwoman," the chief dismissed with a wave of his hand. "Pay her no mind. She'll wander away eventually." But Uzodinma felt her gaze like heat on his back. He told me later, many years later when we sat by another fire, that her eyes seemed to look through him, into him, seeing things he didn't understand about himself. Things buried deep in his spirit. The night before the festival, Uzodinma had a dream. A figure made of light stood before him, calling his name in a voice that sounded like wind and water and fire all singing together. He woke in darkness, his heart pounding like drums, sweat covering his skin. Outside his tiny hut, marked in the dust, was a strange symbol. A circle with lines crossing through it like spokes on a wheel. He stared at it, confused and frightened by its meaning. Before he could sweep it away, the priest arrived at dawn, demanding to speak with him alone. And that, children, was when Uzodinma's quiet life shattered like a dropped calabash. "The gods have chosen you," the priest told him. Just like that. No gentleness. No preparation. Uzodinma, children, he actually laughed. Can you imagine? He thought the priest was playing some cruel joke on a poor orphan boy. "Chosen me for what, father?" he asked, his voice shaking like a leaf in wind. "For sacrifice." You see, he thought perhaps he was being selected to die for some great purpose. That the gods wanted his life to appease their anger. "For marriage," the priest said simply. "To Chief Odosiabodo's daughter, OMALICHA." The laughter died in Uzodinma's throat. He stared at the priest, waiting for the joke to end. But the old man's face was serious as death. "I'm nobody," Uzodinma finally whispered. "I have nothing. I own nothing. I am nothing. How could I marry the chief's daughter? She doesn't even know my name." "The gods do not make mistakes, boy," the priest replied, his voice firm as stone. "They see what we cannot see. They know what we cannot know. They have plans that span not just years but generations. You will marry her at dawn tomorrow." Uzodinma protested, fear making his voice high and thin. He knew what this meant. Chief Odosiabodo would hate him. The village would mock him. His simple, quiet life would be destroyed forever. But the priest grabbed his shoulder with surprising strength. "Listen to me, boy. Destiny cannot be refused. If you try to run, worse will come. For you and for the girl. The gods have spoken, and their word is final." That evening, as Uzodinma sat alone in his little hut trying to understand what was happening to his life, heavy footsteps approached. The door burst open. Chief Odosiabodo stood there, filling the doorway, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. "You will marry my daughter at dawn," he announced, each word sharp as a blade. "I am forced to give her to you because the gods demand it. But understand this, boy. You will live at the edge of the village, far from my compound. You will never speak of this marriage as anything but what it is, a punishment. You will never claim any connection to my family. Do you understand?" Uzodinma could only nod, too frightened to speak. The chief left, and the orphan boy sat in darkness, wondering how his peaceful life had been torn apart by forces he couldn't control. Meanwhile, back in her dark prison, OMALICHA was sobbing. Her mother came to tell her the news, voice thick with pity and shame. "Daughter, you are to marry Uzadinma, the orphan boy. Tomorrow at dawn." "Mother, please," OMALICHA begged, reaching out in her blindness. "Anything but this. I'll do anything. I'll pray every day. I'll serve in the shrine. Just not this." "There is no choice," her mother said, and I heard the tears in her voice too. "The gods have decided. The priest has confirmed it. Your father has no power to change it. I don't even know him." OMALICHA cried out. "What kind of man is he? What will become of me?" Her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something true and hard. "You should have thought of these things before you mocked the gods, daughter. Before you threw your pride in their faces. Now you will learn what it means to have nothing. To be nothing. Just as that boy has been his whole life." Those words cut deep because they were true, children. Always remember this, pride always comes before a fall. That night, locked in her darkness, OMALICHA felt herself sinking into despair. She was blind. Being given to a servant. Her father was ashamed of her. The gods were angry with her. Everything she had ever valued about herself was gone. Then, through her misery, she heard footsteps approaching. Quiet steps, careful steps. The kind of steps made by someone who had learned to move through the world without disturbing it. Someone who knew what it meant to be invisible. Uzadinma knelt before her in that dark hut. She couldn't see him, but she felt his presence. Gentle. Uncertain. Afraid. "OMALICHA," he said softly, and his voice was kinder than she expected. "I know you don't want this marriage. I know I'm not what you imagined for your life. But I promise you, I will not hurt you. I will try to be kind. I will try to make this bearable for you." His humility touched something in her hardened heart. Something she didn't know could still be touched. But even as that small warmth spread through her chest, she felt something else. The gods watching. Their presence thick in the air. She sensed an invisible hand touch her shoulder, though no one was there. The gods were not finished with either of them yet. At dawn, children, they married under the sacred Irako tree. You know the one, that ancient tree at the village center that has stood for more generations than anyone can count. The same tree where marriages and judgments and important decisions have been witnessed for hundreds of years. But this wedding was nothing like the grand celebration OMALICHA had once imagined for herself. There were no crowds of guests. No mountains of food. No musicians playing joyful songs. Just a handful of witnesses. The priest in his ceremonial robes. A few elders who were required to make the marriage legal. And Chief Odoziabodo, standing with his back turned the entire time, his shoulders stiff as a corpse. He refused to look at them. Refused to acknowledge what was happening. His precious daughter, his beautiful OMALICHA, being married to an orphan servant. The shame was more than his pride could bear. The priest blessed them with palm wine and kola nuts, speaking the traditional words that bound them together. He tied their wrists with white cloth, the ancient symbol of unity. OMALICHA couldn't see any of it, but she felt the rough texture of the cloth, felt Uzadinma's gentle hand trembling against hers. Then something strange happened, children. Something that made even the priest pause. As he raised his hands to complete the ritual blessing, a sudden wind swept through the clearing. Strong enough to bend the ancient Irako tree. Strong enough to scatter leaves like frightened birds. And strong enough to extinguish the sacred flame burning in its clay pot. Everyone froze. You don't extinguish the ritual flame. It's bad luck. Or worse. The priest's voice wavered as he relit it with shaking hands. The spirits are unsettled, he said carefully, choosing his words like a man walking through thorns. But they are present. This marriage is witnessed by forces beyond our understanding. Chief Odoziabodo made a sound then, something between a groan and a curse. After the ceremony, he spoke to them for the first time, his voice cold as a dry season stream. You will live in Uzodinma's hut at the village edge. You will not come to my compound unless I summon you. You will not speak of this shame to anyone outside this village. If anyone asks, you may say you are married, but never, never say how it came to be. Then he turned and walked away, leaving his blind daughter standing there, abandoned like trash at the market. Uzodinma took her hand gently. Come, he said softly. I'll guide you. She clung to his arm, terrified of the unfamiliar path ahead. Every step was uncertain. Every sound amplified in her darkness. Then, as they walked toward the forest path leading to his hut, she heard them. Whispers. Voices in the trees calling her name. OMALICHA. OMALICHA. The spirits were following them. Now, children, let me tell you about that first day in Uzodinma's hut. It was tiny. One small room with walls you could touch on both sides if you stretched your arms. A raffia sleeping mat. A cooking pot with a crack in the side. A few pieces of worn cloth. This was OMALICHA's new home. From a compound full of servants and comfort and everything a chief's daughter could want, to this. But you know what? Uzodinma tried his be soft. You've been so kind to me. Let me comfort you for once. For a long moment, he was silent. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he finally spoke the truth he'd been carrying alone for so many years. I remember nothing of my parents, Uzodinma said, his voice breaking like old pottery. Only fire. Screams. And hands that carried me away into the night. OMALICHA stayed quiet, listening, her hand on his shoulder. I was very small, he continued, each word painful to speak. Maybe 3 or 4 years old. I remember warmth. A woman singing to me, her voice sweet like honey. Then suddenly, shouting. Men with torches. Fire everywhere, lighting up the night like day. Someone grabbed me, covered my mouth so tight I couldn't breathe, ran with me through smoke and darkness. He stopped, breathing hard, reliving memories he had tried to bury. I woke up in a different village. Everything hurt. An old woman was caring for me. She said I had been found by the river at dawn, alone, nearly drowned. She didn't know who I was or where I came from. Neither did I. How did you end up here? OMALICHA asked softly, her heart aching for this gentle man who had known nothing but loss. The old woman died when I was 7. She was very old, and one morning she just didn't wake up. I had nowhere to go, so I wandered from village to village, working for food. Sleeping wherever people would let me. Your father found me sleeping in his goat pen when I was about 10 years old. I thought he would beat me or chase me away, but instead, he let me stay. Gave me work. Gave me a place to sleep. He saved my life, really. His voice grew quiet. That's why I never complained about the hard work, or the small room, or the way people treated me like I was nothing. Because compared to wandering and starving, this was everything. OMALICHA felt tears running down her face, tears for him this time, not for herself. Before she could respond, before she could tell him that he wasn't nothing, that he had never been nothing, someone knocked on their door. In the middle of the night, a knock is never good news, children. Never. Uzodinma opened the door carefully, and there stood the village seer. She was ancient, that woman. Older than anyone could remember. Her eyes were clouded white with age, but somehow she saw more than those of us with clear sight. She looked past Uzodinma, straight at OMALICHA, though OMALICHA couldn't see her back. OMALICHA, the seer said, her voice creaking like an old door. I must speak with you. The ancestors sent me. Uzidinma stepped aside, confused and a little frightened. The seer entered their tiny hut and sat down without asking permission, the way old people do when they have important things to say. When she spoke, her words would change everything they thought they knew. "Child, your blindness is not punishment. It is preparation. You are part of a prophecy spoken long before you were born." Uzidinma stiffened at those words. OMALICHA felt the tension roll off him like heat. "What prophecy?" she asked, her heart beginning to race. The seer turned to Uzidinma then, her blind eyes somehow finding his face in the darkness. Her next words were whispered, but in that small hut, OMALICHA heard them clearly. "Your father waits for you, boy. The truth has been buried, but graves never keep their secrets forever." Now, children, after the seer left that night, strange things began to happen. Things that made even the bravest adults whisper nervously. The first sign came at midnight. A calabash in their hut cracked by itself, right down the middle. No one touched it. No one dropped it. It just cracked with a sound like a bone breaking, and water spilled across the floor like tears. They heard it in their sleep, that sharp snap. And woke to find the pieces scattered as if thrown by an invisible hand. The next morning, something even stranger happened. As Uzidinma walked through the village to fetch water, one of Chief Odoziabodo's goats bowed to him. Actually bowed, children. Bent its front legs like a subject greeting a king. Other servants saw it happen. They stared with mouths open, whispering urgently to each other. "Did you see that?" The goat bowed to the orphan boy. By afternoon, birds began gathering on the roof of Uzidinma and OMALICHA's hut. Not one or two, dozens of them. Different kinds. Hawks that normally hunt chickens sat peacefully next to doves. Eagles perched beside sparrows. All of them silent. All of them watching the door like guards. Neighbors came to stare at the strange sight. "Something unnatural is happening," they muttered. "The gods are moving around that hut. We should stay away." Word reached the priest, as it always does in a small village. Nothing stays secret when the ancestors want truth revealed. He sent a young boy with an urgent message: Uzidinma must return to the shrine immediately. As they walked together through the village, OMALICHA's hand on Uzidinma's arm, people stepped back to let them pass. Some bowed their heads slightly. Others made protective signs with their fingers to ward off spirits. The priest was waiting at the shrine entrance, his face grave as a funeral. Inside, sacred herbs burned in clay pots, filling the air with thick, sweet smoke. "Uzidinma," the priest said, his voice heavy with knowledge he hadn't wanted to discover. "Your spirit aura has grown too strong. I can see it now with my trained eyes, glowing around you like heat waves. Something ancient sleeps inside you, boy. Something powerful that is beginning to wake." OMALICHA stood beside her husband, trembling at the priest's words. What was inside Uzidinma? What were the gods revealing? Then the shrine flames suddenly flared, blazing higher than any natural fire should. The heat pushed them back a step. And through those flames, a voice spoke. Not human. Not entirely. Layered with echoes like many voices speaking as one. He must remember, the voice thundered, shaking dust from the shrine roof. The truth has been buried for 18 years. But graves never keep their secrets forever. Uzidinma must remember who he was, who he is, and who he is meant to become. The flames died down as suddenly as they'd risen. In the shocked silence that followed, Uzidinma's voice came out small and frightened. Remember what? I don't understand what you want from me. But the spirit had said its piece. The rest would unfold in its own time. That very night, children, the memories began to come. Uzidinma woke up gasping, his body soaked in sweat, images flooding his mind like a broken dam releasing water. Royal cloth. Deep red and indigo patterns woven with threads of gold. He had never seen such cloth with his adult eyes, but somehow he knew every detail. How it felt. How it smelled. How it rustled when someone walked. A mother singing. But now her voice was clear, no longer the faded echo it had been. She sang in a language he didn't consciously know, but his soul understood every word. Songs of protection. Songs of blessing. Songs of royal bloodlines and ancient promises. A warrior's face. Scarred and cruel. Laughing as fire consumed everything. His teeth yellow in the firelight. His eyes cold as a snake's. That face had haunted Yusadinma's nightmares for years, but now he could see it clearly. Every detail sharp as broken glass. The memories came in violent waves, one after another. Yusadinma cried out in his sleep, thrashing like a man drowning. OMALICHA held him, felt him trembling like a leaf in a storm. "I see them," he gasped between sobs. "My parents. My real parents. My home. It was beautiful. We had everything, wealth, power, respect. Then they came in the night. They killed everyone. Everyone." "Who came?" OMALICHA asked gently, stroking his hair like a mother comforting a child. "I can't see all their faces clearly. But I hear my mother screaming my name. My real name. The name I was born with." "What is it?" she whispered. "Chukwuemeka," he said, and speaking it aloud felt like putting on clothes that had always belonged to him. "My name was Chukwuemeka. The name means, God has done something great, children. Remember that. It's important. A prince's name. A name of destiny and power. A name for someone meant to lead, not to serve." As OMALICHA held her trembling husband, comforting him through these painful revelations, they heard heavy footsteps outside. Running footsteps. Angry footsteps that shook the ground. Their door burst open without warning. No knock. No permission. Chief Odoziabodo stood there, his chest heaving, his eyes wild in the lamplight. "What is happening?" he demanded, his voice sharp with something that sounded like fear. "The whole village talks about strange signs around this hut. The priest says Yusadinma carries powerful spirits. Birds gathering. Animals bowing. This madness ends now." He lunged forward to grab Yusadinma, to drag him away from whatever destiny was unfolding. But when his hand touched Yusadinma's arm, he jerked back like he'd been burned by fire. His hand was red. Blistered. The chief stared at his hand, then at Yusadinma, then back at his hand. And in that moment, all the color drained from his face. "You," he breathed, his voice barely audible. "It can't be. You should be dead. You should all be dead." Those words, children. Those terrible words that confirmed what the spirits had been trying to reveal. Chief Odoziabodo knew who Yusadinma really was. Had always known. And had prayed to every god that the secret would stay buried forever. We all gathered at the shrine the next morning, children. The whole village knew something important was happening. When the gods speak this loudly, even the stubborn must listen. Chief Odoziabodo demanded the priest stop whatever he was doing. His voice was high and frightened, nothing like the strong chief we all knew. "This is dangerous," he shouted. "You're awakening things that should stay buried. Stop this now. I command it as chief." But the priest looked at him with eyes as cold as river stones. "The gods awaken what they choose, Odoziabodo. Your opinion means nothing to them. And I serve forces older than your chiefdom, older than this village, older than your grandfather's grandfather. I am the chief of umuakpa. And I am the servant of the ancestors. Know your place." The priest had never spoken to the chief like that before. Never. We young ones watching from the back gasped at his boldness. But Odosiabodo's horror at seeing Uzodinma standing in the sacred shrine was more than just concern. It was personal. It was fear. His face had gone gray. His hands shook. Sweat poured down his face despite the cool morning air. Why would a chief fear a servant boy? That's what we all wondered. As OMALICHA stood there in her darkness, she felt that presence again. The one that had touched her shoulder at her wedding. The one that had been guiding her all along. And it whispered in her ear, words only she could hear, "Your father fears him." Ask yourself why a powerful chief would fear a powerless orphan. Ask yourself what secret is worth such fear. She gasped aloud at those words. Uzodinma turned toward her, concerned. "What's wrong?" But before she could answer, an old man stepped forward from the crowd. Very old, children. Bent with age, walking with a stick, his voice weak but determined. "I must speak," he said. "I have kept silent too long, but the gods are demanding truth now. I feel it in my bones." "Elder," the priest said respectfully, "what burden have you been carrying?" The old man's voice shook as he spoke. 18 years ago, I was a young warrior. I served Chief Odosiabodo faithfully. One night, he gathered a group of us, his most trusted men. He said we were going to attack a neighboring kingdom. He said they had wronged us and deserved punishment. He paused, gathering strength to continue. We attacked at night. Burned a royal compound. Killed a king and queen. It was slaughter, not war. I have carried the shame ever since. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. The priest raised his hand for silence. "Continue, elder. What happened to the royal family?" "Everyone died," the old man said, tears running down his weathered face. "Everyone. Except." He looked directly at Uzodinma. "Except one infant. A baby boy who disappeared during the attack. Some said he was killed and his body lost in the fire. Others said someone saved him, carried him away into the night." His voice dropped to a whisper. That baby would be about Uzodinma's age now. The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye turned to Chief Odosiabodo. And that's when Uzodinma spoke, his voice ringing with sudden certainty. "I recognize your voice, Chief. From my nightmares. From my memories. You were there that night. You led the attack. You ordered my family's murder. Now children, what happened next was like watching a calabash crack open to reveal rot inside. We marched to the shrine, all of us. Uzodinma and OMALICHA leading the way, the old warrior following, the priest with his staff, and the entire village behind like a river flowing downhill. Chief Odosiabodo tried to leave, tried to walk away, but strong young men blocked his path. "You will face this," Uzodinma said, his voice no longer the quiet servant's voice we'd always known. There was power in it now. Authority. The voice of someone born to lead. "You will stand before the gods and tell the truth. I am the chief." Odosiabodo blustered, but his voice was weak. "You cannot command me." "The gods command you," Uzodinma replied. "And I am the rightful heir to the throne you helped destroy. You will answer for what you did." We gathered at the shrine as the sun reached its highest point. The priest called forth the spirits with sacred herbs and ancient chants. Smoke rose thick and white, swirling in patterns that made your eyes water if you stared too long. Drums beat a rhythm that made the earth itself vibrate beneath our feet. Chief Odosiabodo, the priest intoned, his voice carrying across the crowd. "The ancestors have questions. Will you answer truthfully, or will you add lying to a spirit council to your other crimes?" My father, the chief, stood rigid. His pride was still fighting against the inevitable, like a man refusing to believe the crocodile has already bitten him. "I will answer," he said finally. "Did you participate in the attack on the royal compound of King Emeka 18 years ago?" The priest's question hung in the air like smoke. Yes. The word came out strangled, forced through clenched teeth. The crowd gasped. Even those who'd heard the old warrior's story couldn't believe it until they heard the chief admit it himself. Did you help kill King Emeka and his queen? Yes. Barely a whisper now. Did you know their infant son survived the attack? Silence. Long, terrible silence. Birds stopped singing. Wind stopped blowing. Even the babies stopped crying. Answer, the priest commanded, his staff striking the ground with force. I suspected, Odoziabodo finally admitted, his voice breaking. One of my men saw someone running with a child. But we searched and never found a body. I hoped. I prayed he had died in the river or the forest. I prayed the gods would keep that secret buried. Why? Uzodinma stepped forward, his whole body trembling with emotion. Why did you want me dead? What did my family do to deserve such hatred? And there, children, in front of the whole village, Chief Odoziabodo's pride finally shattered completely. The truth erupted from his mouth like poison he could no longer hold inside. Because you were the heir, he shouted. Because your bloodline was more powerful than mine. Because the prophecy said a child from your royal line would unite all the kingdoms and rule with perfect justice. He laughed, a horrible bitter sound. My own power would be nothing compared to yours. The other chiefs, they were afraid too. We couldn't let the prophecy come true. So we made a pact. We would end your family line completely. Kill everyone. Erase you from memory. Make sure no heir survived to fulfill the prophecy. He looked at Uzodinma with something like madness in his eyes. But you lived. Somehow you lived. And I took you in like the fool I am. Kept you close. Made you a servant. Kept you small and powerless. I thought I could control destiny itself. As he spoke these terrible words, something began to happen to Uzodinma. He started to glow, children. Actually glow, like a lamp burning from inside his body. Light poured from him, bright enough that we had to shield our eyes. The very air around him shimmered with power. And we all fell to our knees. Every single one of us. Because we understood then. We were in the presence of someone chosen by the gods themselves. Then, children, then came the moment that changed everything. The deity appeared. Not in a dream. Not in a vision. Right there in front of us all. The air grew thick and heavy, pressing down on us like a weight. The temperature dropped until we could see our breath in the afternoon heat. And a presence manifested in the shrine, so powerful that several people fainted right there where they knelt. Uzodinma, the voice came from everywhere at once. From the ground. From the sky. From inside our own chests. You were hidden and protected by our design. Every step of your path was guided by hands you couldn't see. The deity's words rolled over us like thunder. We guided the servant who saved you that night. We led her to the river. We kept the boat from sinking. We brought you to this very village, to this very compound, for a purpose. The light around Uzodinma grew even brighter. Your destiny was never to be a servant. That was your training. You needed to learn humility. To understand suffering. To know what it means to have nothing so you would appreciate everything. To feel powerlessness so you would never abuse power. We were preparing you to be not just a king, but a just king. A righteous king. The kind of king your father should have been. The deity turned its attention to OMALICHA then, and she felt its gaze like warmth on her skin. OMALICHA, the voice said, somehow gentle despite its power. Your blindness was not punishment for your words. Your words were merely the excuse we used to begin your transformation. But I mocked love, she whispered. And love needed to teach you a lesson, the deity agreed. But not through cruelty. Through wisdom. You needed to lose your sight to truly see. You valued only what eyes could perceive: beauty, status, appearance. So we took your eyes away to force you to value what matters: character, kindness, love. The deity's presence seemed to wrap around both of them like a warm cloth. Your blindness brought you to Uzodinma. It made you his equal instead of his better. It taught you to listen instead of judge. It opened your heart to see what your eyes had always missed, that true worth has nothing to do with appearance or status. Then came the words that made OMALICHA's heart stop beating for a moment. Your sight will return, child. But only if you can do one thing that seems impossible. What? She whispered, hope and fear warring in her chest. You must forgive your father. Completely. Truly. From your heart. The entire village held its breath. Forgive him. The man who had murdered Uzodinma's parents. Who had stolen a kingdom. Who had manipulated and lied and destroyed. How could anyone forgive that? Now children, this is the part of the story that teaches us the hardest lesson. Listen carefully. OMALICHA stood there in her darkness, the weight of the deity's words pressing down on her. She could feel everyone watching, waiting to see what she would do. Forgive her father. The man who had tried to kill her husband. Who had murdered a king and queen in their own home. Who had burned children, slaughtered innocents, and then lied about it for 18 years. Who had valued his own power over justice, over truth, over human life itself. Part of her wanted to scream, no. Wanted to say, let him suffer for what he did. Let him pay for his crimes. And that would have been fair, wouldn't it? Justice demands punishment. But the deity wasn't asking for justice. It was asking for mercy. And there's a difference, children. There's a deep difference. OMALICHA thought about her father. Not the murderer. Not the power-hungry chief. But the man who had held her when she was small. Who had taught her to recognize bird calls. Who had braided her hair before her mother learned how. She thought about the father she had known before she understood what pride and power could do to a person's heart. She thought about Uzodinma, her gentle husband who had every right to hate but chose kindness instead. Who had been orphaned and homeless and powerless, yet never became cruel. She thought about what the gods had taught her in her blindness, that holding on to hatred only chains you to the person who hurt you. That forgiveness isn't about excusing evil. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of it. She took a shaking breath, tears streaming down her face. Father, she said, her voice barely audible. Odoziabodo made a sound like a wounded animal. OMALICHA, I know what you did, she continued, her voice growing stronger. I know you murdered innocent people. I know you tried to kill the man who became my husband. I know you've lied and manipulated and destroyed lives to protect your own power. She paused, gathering her courage. I know you don't deserve forgiveness. I know if the gods struck you down right now, it would be justice. But... Her voice broke. But I also know that holding on to hatred will poison me. Will destroy me from inside. Will make me become like you, hard and bitter and afraid. She turned in his direction, though she still couldn't see him. So I forgive you, Father. Not because you deserve it. Not because I'm excusing what you did. But because I need to be free of this burden. I forgive you so that I can heal. So that Uzodinma can heal. So that we can all move forward instead of being chained to the past forever. The moment those words left her mouth, children, something cracked. Like an egg breaking. Like chains falling away. Like the dawn breaking through the longest night. Light exploded behind OMALICHA's eyes. Sudden. Brilliant. Overwhelming, like staring at the sun. She gasped, her hands flying to her face, stumbling backward. Uzodinma caught her, held her steady. OMALICHA? What's happening? Are you all right? Her vision returned in a burst of colors and shapes. After weeks and weeks of darkness, the world came rushing back like water through a broken dam. Blurry at first. Then clearer. Clearer. Until she could see everything. The first thing she saw clearly, the very first thing, was Uzodinma's face. Tears streaming down his cheeks. Eyes full of love and concern. His face glowing with that divine light. And he was beautiful, children. Not because of his features, though they were fine. But because of what she could finally see with new eyes, the beauty of his spirit. The goodness that radiated from him like heat from a fire. I can see, she whispered, wonder filling her voice. I can see you. Oh, Uzodinma, I can finally see you. And she understood then. She had been looking at him every day before her blindness, but she had never truly seen him. Never noticed him. Never valued him. The gods had taken her sight to teach her how to see. Chief Odoziabodo collapsed then, children. Fell to his knees like a great tree finally succumbing to rot. His strong, proud body crumbled like old clay. I'm sorry, he sobbed, his face in his hands like a child caught in terrible wrong. I'm so sorry. For everything. For all of it. For the people I killed. For the power I chose over righteousness. For the man I became. We all watched, the entire village gathered there, as our chief broke down completely. Years of pride and power and carefully maintained dignity dissolving into tears and regret. Some of us young ones had never seen a grown man cry before. It was frightening and somehow sacred all at once. The deity's presence still filled the shrine, warm and terrible and merciful. When it spoke again, every one of us felt the words in our bones. Odoziabodo, the voice said, and there was sorrow in it now. Your crimes are recorded in the memory of the earth itself. Your guilt is written in blood that cannot be washed away. But. And here the voice softened slightly. But the circle of violence ends here. The chain of hatred breaks. You will live, but you will no longer lead these people. Your time as chief is finished. Odoziabodo looked up, tears and dust streaking his face. He didn't argue. Didn't protest. Just nodded, accepting his fate. Who will lead, he asked, though he already knew the answer. Every person gathered there already knew. The deity turned to Uzodinma and OMALICHA, and we all felt the weight of its attention on them. These two, the voice proclaimed. The prince who learned humility by living as a servant. The proud daughter who learned compassion by walking in darkness. Separately, they are incomplete. Together, they are balanced. Together, they are whole. Together, they will guide umuakpa into a new age of justice and mercy. The priest stepped forward then, carrying something we had never seen before. A carved staff, ancient and beautiful, that seemed to glow with its own inner light. This belonged to your father, King Emeka, the priest said to Uzodinma, his voice reverent. We thought it was destroyed in the fire. But the gods preserved it. Hidden away. Waiting for this moment. He held it out. Chukwuemeka, son of Emeka, rightful heir to the stolen throne. Do you accept the responsibility of leadership? Do you promise to rule with the justice your father never achieved? Do you swear to use your power to lift up the powerless, protect the vulnerable, and guide the people with wisdom earned through suffering? Uzodinma looked at OMALICHA. A question in his eyes. She saw it clearly now, this good, gentle man asking if she would walk this difficult path with him. She nodded, taking his hand. Together, they stepped forward. We accept, Uzodinma said, his voice strong and clear. Together, we accept. And the deity blessed them then, children. We all felt it. Power flowing through them, binding them not just as husband and wife but as partners in destiny. Two people who had been brought together by what seemed like punishment but was actually providence. The whole crowd erupted in celebration. Drums began to play. People danced. Children shouted with joy. After 18 years of injustice, truth had finally won. But Chief Odoziabodo remained on his knees, broken. And perhaps, in that breaking, the first seeds of healing were planted. Because sometimes, children, we have to be completely broken before we can be remade into something better. Now, the days that followed were strange and overwhelming, let me tell you. Word spread faster than wind carries fire through dry grass. The lost prince found alive. The chief's daughter humbled by the gods and restored. The deity appearing to the whole village in daylight. People came from villages 3 days' journey away just to see Uzodinma and OMALICHA with their own eyes. To witness the couple blessed by the gods themselves. To touch the staff that had belonged to the murdered king. Uzodinma and OMALICHA moved into the chief's compound, OMALICHA's childhood home, now theirs to lead from. It felt strange to them both. Uzodinma, who had slept on a raffia mat in the servants' quarters, now sleeping in the chief's own room. OMALICHA, who had been cast out in shame, now returning in glory. Chief Odoziabodo moved to a small hut at the village edge. The very hut where Uzodinma and OMALICHA had lived as outcasts. Do you see the poetry in that, children? The wheel turned full circle. He who had been high was brought low. He who had been low was raised high. And the old chief didn't protest. Didn't fight. His spirit seemed broken, yes, but in breaking, something was changing inside him. One afternoon, about a week after everything happened, OMALICHA visited her father. She found him sitting outside his small hut, staring at nothing, looking like he had aged 20 years in 7 days. "Father," she said softly, announcing her presence. He looked up, and she saw he had been crying. His eyes were red and swollen. "OMALICHA. You came." His voice was rough with surprise. "Of course I came. You're still my father, despite everything. I don't deserve your visits. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve to breathe the same air as you and that boy. That man, that king I tried to kill." They sat in silence for a while. The kind of silence that holds years of unspoken words. Finally, he spoke again, his voice cracking. "I was so afraid, daughter. Afraid of losing power. Afraid of becoming nothing. Afraid that if I wasn't the strongest, the most important, the most feared, then I would disappear. So I tried to control everything. Control you. Control the kingdom. Control even the prophecy itself." He laughed bitterly. "But you can't control the gods, can you? I thought if I could just hold on to power tightly enough, I could protect myself. But all I did was destroy everything I touched." OMALICHA felt tears running down her face, tears of pity for this broken man who had once seemed so strong. "No, father. No one can control the gods. And trying to control everything made you lose everything that mattered." He nodded slowly, understanding finally sinking into his hardened heart. "I'm sorry I made you feel like your only value was in your beauty. I'm sorry I taught you pride instead of wisdom. I'm sorry I raised you to think power mattered more than character." "I know," she said quietly. "But I learned wisdom anyway, father. Just not the way you intended. The gods taught me through darkness what you could never teach me in light." Before she left, he grabbed her hand with surprising strength. "Be a better leader than I was. Be what I should have been. Be what I wish I had been. We will," she promised. "Uzodinma and I together. We will." And she meant it, children. Every word. Now, leading a village is not like in the stories where everything becomes perfect the moment the right person takes charge. No, no. Uzodinma and OMALICHA had to work hard, let me tell you. Some neighboring kingdoms were suspicious, you see. A servant suddenly claiming royal blood. They demanded proof. Sent messengers asking questions. Some even threatened war if this pretender tried to claim authority over the region. But slowly, with patience and wisdom, Uzodinma proved who he was. Old elders who had known his father came forward. "This boy has Emeka's eyes," they said. "The same proud forehead. The same way of standing. The same voice, gods, it's like Emeka himself speaking." They examined him for the royal marks. Every member of Emeka's bloodline carried a birthmark on their left shoulder. A mark shaped like a crescent moon. Uzodinma had it. They tested his knowledge of things only royalty would know. Uzodinma remembered fragments, words in the royal language, songs sung only to princes, stories told only in the palace. And of course, the gods themselves had declared him. That carried weight nothing else could match. When deities speak clearly, even the skeptical must listen. So gradually, the neighboring kingdoms accepted him. Some reluctantly. Some eagerly, glad to see Emeka's line restored. And Uzodinma and OMALICHA began the real work, implementing new laws. Fair laws. Laws that protected servants as well as nobles. Laws that said a person's worth wasn't determined by their birth but by their character. Laws that punished violence and rewarded compassion. They created courts where even the poorest farmer could bring complaints against the wealthy. Where women could own property and speak in council. Where orphans and widows were protected by law, not just by charity. The villages under their authority began to thrive like gardens after rain. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in colors of fire and gold, Uzodinma turned to his wife. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked quietly. "Miss what?" OMALICHA asked, though she already knew. "The life you would have had. If none of this had happened. If you had kept your sight and married some wealthy king and lived in luxury without all this struggle and responsibility." She thought about it carefully. The old OMALICHA would have said yes immediately. Would have mourned the loss of an easier path. Would have resented the gods for the hard lessons. But she wasn't that person anymore. "No," she said honestly, surprising herself with how true it felt. "That life would have been empty, Uzodinma. Beautiful on the outside but hollow within. I would have lived my whole life without ever truly seeing anyone, including myself." She squeezed his hand. "The gods took my sight to give me vision. Took my pride to give me love. Took everything I thought I wanted to give me everything I actually needed." He smiled and kissed her forehead gently. "I used to resent being an orphan. Being nobody. Having nothing. But if that's what led me to you, to this, to understanding what truly matters, then I wouldn't change a single painful step." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set completely, painting the world in shades of purple and deep blue. Two people who had been brought together by what seemed like cruelty but was actually the deepest kindness. And they understood now. They understood why the gods work in ways that seem harsh. Because easy lessons are quickly forgotten. But lessons learned through pain and darkness and struggle, those lessons change you forever. Years passed, children. Good years filled with peace and growth. Uzodinma and OMALICHA's leadership brought prosperity that umuakpa hadn't known in generations. Children grew up learning stories not of war and conquest but of justice and mercy. Of how the gods reward humility and punish pride. One day, someone unexpected appeared at their compound. An old woman, bent with age, walking with difficulty. She asked to see the king and queen. When they came out to meet her, Uzodinma stopped breathing. He stared at her face, his mind racing backward through memories. "I know you," he whispered. "You're the woman who used to stare at me. Years ago, before all this began. People thought you were mad." The old woman smiled through her tears. "You don't remember me, do you, child? But I remember you. I remember everything." "Who are you?" OMALICHA asked gently, sensing this woman carried important history. "I was your mother's personal servant, the woman said to Uzadinma, her voice shaking with emotion. The one who pulled you from your burning home. The one who ran with you through fire and darkness. The one who put you in that boat to save your life. Uzadinma's eyes went wide. But you died. The warriors shot you. I saw you fall into the river. I should have died, she agreed, touching her back where a faded scar showed through her worn cloth. The arrow should have killed me instantly. But the gods, they had other plans. They healed me somehow. Kept me alive long enough to crawl from that river. To watch from a distance and make sure you survived. She reached out with a trembling hand and touched Uzadinma's face, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. You look so much like her. Your mother. Queen Adis. She would be so proud of the man you've become. So proud of how you've used your power to help instead of hurt. Uzadinma wept then, children. This strong king broke down and cried in the arms of the woman who had saved his life 18 years earlier. And OMALICHA wept too, seeing her husband finally connected to his past, to the mother he barely remembered. They invited the old woman to stay with them. To live in the compound. To finally rest after years of wandering and watching from afar. She became their advisor, their link to Uzadinma's past, their living reminder of how the gods work in mysterious ways. She told them stories of Queen Adis, how kind she was, how she insisted on learning every servant's name, how she would sit with the sick and comfort the grieving. You have her heart, the old woman told Uzadinma. Power didn't corrupt her, and it hasn't corrupted you. That's rare, child. That's the gods working through you. Meanwhile, Chief Odoziabodo's health slowly declined. But something interesting happened, children. As his body weakened, his spirit grew stronger. He spent his days helping others, teaching young boys to farm, repairing people's huts, sharing what little he had. People began to see a different man emerging from the shell of the proud chief. OMALICHA visited him often, and gradually, painfully, they rebuilt something. Not the relationship they'd had before, that was gone forever. But something new. Something honest. Built on truth instead of pride. One day, she brought her father to meet the old servant woman. This is the woman who saved Uzadinma, she said. Odoziabodo fell to his knees before her, shocking everyone. Forgive me, he begged. I tried to kill the boy you risked everything to save. I don't deserve your mercy, but I'm asking for it anyway. The old woman looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something wise. I forgive you because holding on to hatred would dishonor my queen's memory. She believed people could change. So I will believe it too. And children, that moment taught us all something important. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending evil didn't happen. It means refusing to let evil continue poisoning the future. The gods blessed Uzadinma and OMALICHA with children. 3 beautiful children who grew up knowing they were both royalty and servants of the people. First came a daughter. They named her Adis, after Uzadinma's mother. She had her father's gentle spirit and her mother's determination. Then a son, whom they named after OMALICHA's grandfather, hoping to redeem that bloodline with a new generation taught different values. Then another daughter, wild and joyful and full of questions. These children grew up hearing both stories, their fathers and their mothers. How he rose from nothing to reclaim his birthright. How she fell from pride to learn humility. How the gods work through both blessing and hardship to shape us into who we're meant to become. One evening, as OMALICHA tucked the children into their sleeping mats, young Adis asked her a question. Mama, if you could go back in time and not be blind, would you? OMALICHA sat down, thinking carefully how to answer. This was an important question. No, my daughter. I wouldn't change it. But didn't it hurt? The child asked, her eyes wide. Weren't you scared? Yes. Very much. It was the most frightening time of my life. But being blind taught me how to truly see. It taught me that real beauty isn't what eyes can see but what hearts can feel. Little Adiz frowned, trying to understand. But you couldn't see Papa. Wasn't that sad? At first, yes. But not being able to see him with my eyes forced me to see him with my heart. And what I found there was more beautiful than any face could ever be. She touched her daughter's cheek gently. Sometimes, little one, the gods hurt us to heal us. They take away what we think we need to give us what we actually need. They break us down to build us up stronger. Like taking away your sight to give you Papa, the child asked. OMALICHA smiled, tears in her eyes. Exactly like that. If I had kept my sight, I would have married some other king. I would have been beautiful and wealthy and proud. But I would have been empty inside. I would never have known your father. Would never have learned what love really means. Then I'm glad you were blind, Adiz said seriously. Because I like having Papa. And you. And this family. OMALICHA laughed through her tears and hugged her daughter close. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. And that, children, is what we call wisdom. Understanding that what seems like tragedy might actually be the greatest blessing in disguise. The village of umuakpa became known throughout the land, children. Known not for its wealth or its army or its powerful magic, but for its justice and mercy. Other kingdoms sent representatives to learn their ways. To understand how a kingdom could thrive when led by someone who had known suffering. Uzidinma and OMALICHA shared their story freely. Not to boast, never to boast, but to teach. To show people that the gods have plans beyond our understanding. That what seems like punishment might actually be preparation. That loss can lead to finding what was always meant to be yours. Every year, on the anniversary of OMALICHA's blindness and healing, they held a great celebration. Not celebrating the blindness itself, but celebrating transformation. Celebrating how pain can lead to growth. How darkness can teach you to see light. People came from villages 5 days' journey away for this festival. There was dancing and drumming, just like that night so long ago when young OMALICHA mocked love and the gods decided to teach her a lesson. But now, when someone mentioned love, OMALICHA didn't laugh. She would stand and speak to the gathered crowd. True love, she would say, her voice carrying across the square, is when the gods break you down and build you back up with someone else's pieces mixed with yours. It's painful. It's terrifying. But it's the only way to become truly whole. And the people would cheer, understanding in their hearts that she spoke truth earned through suffering. One year, during this festival, they passed the very spot where OMALICHA had collapsed that fateful night. She stopped, remembering. Uzidinma squeezed her hand, knowing what she was thinking. Do you think you would have loved me? She asked him quietly. If I hadn't been blinded? If we hadn't been forced together by the gods? He thought about it honestly, respecting her enough not to lie. Probably not, he admitted. I would have been too afraid to even speak to you. You were so beautiful, so far above me. And you would have looked right through me, never even noticing I existed. So the gods knew. The gods always know, OMALICHA. They saw what we couldn't see. That we needed each other. That I needed someone who understood suffering to keep me humble in power. That you needed someone genuinely kind to show you what real love looks like. They continued walking through the festival, hand in hand, under the same moon that had witnessed her prideful words so long ago. And they were grateful, children. Grateful for the darkness that led to light. Grateful for the breaking that led to healing. Grateful for the gods who loved them enough to hurt them, to teach them, to transform them into who they were always meant to be. Years later, when their children were grown and beginning their own journeys, Uzidinma and OMALICHA sat together under the Irako tree where they had married. That sacred tree that had witnessed so much, their awkward wedding, their confused beginning, the start of a love neither expected. They were older now. Gray showing in their hair. Their movements slower. their faces marked by time and wisdom. But the love between them had only deepened, like a river cutting deeper into stone with each passing season. "Tell me," Uzadinma said, taking her hand. "If you could give advice to the young OMALICHA, the proud girl who mocked love that night, what would you say to her?" OMALICHA thought about it, staring up at the tree's branches spreading above them like protective arms. "I would tell her that beauty fades but character lasts forever. That being humbled is a gift, not a curse. That the servant boy she never even noticed would become the love of her life and the greatest king this land has ever known." She smiled. But she wouldn't listen. She was too proud. She had to learn the hard way, through darkness and fear and loss. Some lessons can only be learned through suffering. "And what about me?" Uzadinma asked. "What would you tell that frightened orphan boy?" "I would tell him that his suffering had purpose. That the gods were preparing him for greatness by letting him taste powerlessness. That the chief's daughter who never saw him would one day see him completely, not with her eyes but with her heart, and love him for exactly who he is." She leaned her head on his shoulder. But he wouldn't believe it either. He was too afraid, too convinced he was nobody. He also had to learn through experience that the gods were with him all along, even when he felt most alone. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set on another day of peace they had built together. Their legacy wasn't just in the laws they'd passed or the justice they'd brought. It was in the story itself. The story of how the gods used blindness to create vision. Used humility to create love. Used suffering to create wisdom. That night, OMALICHA had a dream. One last visit from the deity that had changed her life so long ago. It appeared to her as gentle light, warm as a mother's embrace. "You have done well," it said, and there was pride in that ancient voice. "You learned what we needed you to learn. You became who we needed you to become. You took the bitter medicine we gave you and let it heal you instead of poisoning you. Thank you," OMALICHA whispered in her dream. "For everything. Even the blindness. Especially the blindness. You understand now," the deity said softly. True sight has nothing to do with eyes. The eyes see only surfaces. But the heart, the heart sees truth. The heart sees souls. The heart sees love. The deity began to fade, its work finally complete. Remember this, daughter. Share this wisdom. Teach your grandchildren. Let your story be a lesson for generations to come. That the gods' hardest blessings are often their greatest gifts. OMALICHA woke with tears on her face and Uzadinma's hand still in hers. She whispered to the darkness, "Thank you for blinding me so I could finally see." Because that was the truth she had learned. Sometimes the gods take away what we think defines us, beauty, sight, pride, status, to give us what actually completes us. Love. Purpose. Wisdom. Wholeness. And that, children, is the greatest gift of all. Now, let me bring this story to its close, because even the longest tales must end, and the fire is burning low. Many more years passed. Uzadinma and OMALICHA grew old together, their love a legend told in villages far and wide. People would point to them and say, "That is what true love looks like." Not the easy love of comfort, but the deep love forged in fire and darkness. Chief Odoziabodo, OMALICHA's father, lived his final years in peace. Before he died, he called his daughter and son-in-law to his bedside. His voice was weak, but his eyes were finally clear, clear of pride, clear of fear, clear of the poison that had driven him to such terrible acts. "I need to say this before I go," he whispered, each word an effort. "You have been better leaders in 10 years than I was in 30. You have shown me what true power looks like. Not control, not fear, not domination, but service. You have taught me that a real king is a servant to his people, not their master." He reached for their hands with his frail fingers. "Thank you. Thank you for forgiving me when I deserved death. Thank you for showing me that people can change, even old fools like me. Thank you for proving that the God's justice is tempered with mercy. He died peacefully that night, and they buried him with honor. Because forgiveness had transformed him from a villain into a man who finally understood what he should have known all along. The old servant woman who had saved Uzodinma lived long enough to hold all three of his children, to see her queen's bloodline continue in wisdom and justice. Before she died, she called Uzodinma to her bedside. "Your mother would be so proud," she whispered. "You have honored her memory not just by surviving, but by becoming exactly the kind of king she hoped you would be. You took everything the gods taught you, the pain, the poverty, the powerlessness, and you used it to understand and help others. That's what royalty should be, child. Not about ruling over people, but about lifting them up." She closed her eyes for the last time with a smile on her face, her duty finally complete. They buried her next to the irako tree, in a place of honor, so that her spirit could watch over the village she had served so faithfully. And life continued, children. Uzodinma and OMALICHA's children grew up to be wise rulers themselves, spreading their parents' lessons throughout the land. Their grandchildren learned the story. How great-grandmother was struck blind for her pride, how great-grandfather was an orphan who became a king, how the gods work in ways that seem cruel but are actually kind. And those grandchildren taught their own children. And so the story passed down through generations, just as I'm telling it to you now. A reminder that the gods see more than we see. That sometimes the worst thing that happens to us is actually the best thing. That love built through struggle lasts longer than love that comes easy. That sight is not the same as vision. That beauty is not the same as worth. That power is not the same as strength. And so, my dear children, as the fire burns down to embers and the night grows deep around us, I will tell you what became of OMALICHA and Uzodinma in their final days. They lived to a great old age, those two. So old that their great-grandchildren would climb on their laps and beg for stories. And they would sit together, just as they had under the irako tree so many times before, and tell about the night a proud girl mocked love and learned the hardest lesson of her life. On the day OMALICHA finally closed her eyes for the last time, Uzodinma was holding her hand. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them, but she saw only him. "Thank you," she whispered with her last strength. "For being patient with the blind girl who couldn't see what was right in front of her." "Thank you," he whispered back, tears streaming down his weathered face. "For teaching me that I was never nobody. That the gods had a plan all along." She smiled one more time, squeezed his hand, and let go. They buried her under the irako tree, in the sacred ground where their unexpected love had begun. And Uzodinma, heartbroken but grateful, knew that one day he would join her there. And he did, children. Just 3 full moons later, as if he couldn't bear to be parted from her for long. They laid him beside her, and the village mourned the passing of the greatest king and queen they had ever known. But you know what? That wasn't the end of their story either. Because their wisdom lived on. Their laws continued to protect the weak. Their example continued to inspire. And their story, this very story I'm telling you now, continued to be passed down, teaching new generations what the old ones learned through pain and darkness and divine intervention. So remember this, children, as you go back to your homes tonight. Remember that when the gods take something from you, they might be preparing you for something greater. When they humble you, they might be teaching you to see truth. When they send hardship, they might be shaping you into who you're meant to become. Young OMALICHA couldn't see that when she stood in the village square, beautiful and proud and blind to what mattered. She had to walk through literal darkness to finally see light. She had to lose everything to find what she truly needed. And that, my dears, is why true love is always guided by the gods, even when it begins in darkness. Especially when it begins in darkness. Because only in darkness can we learn to see with our hearts instead of our eyes. Only through breaking can we be remade stronger. Only through losing can we truly find. Now, off with you. The night grows late and your mothers will scold me for keeping you so long. But before you go, let me leave you with this: if you ever find yourself walking in darkness, if you ever feel the gods have abandoned you, if you ever think your suffering has no purpose, remember OMALICHA and Uzidinma. Remember that the gods were with them all along, working in ways they couldn't understand, leading them toward a love more real than anything they could have imagined. And trust, children. Trust that you're being led toward your own purpose, even when you can't see the path ahead. Now go. Sleep well. And dream of the gods who love us enough to teach us hard lessons that lead to beautiful endings. The old storyteller watches the children scatter to their homes, then looks up at the stars and whispers, "Thank you for letting me tell their story one more time. May it teach another generation what my grandmother taught me. That your plans are always better than ours, even when we can't see it. And somewhere, in the space between earth and sky, the gods smile."